How's it going, everybody? Welcome in for another edition of the unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. I know it's been a few weeks since I last did a full episode. I am doing shorter clips on YouTube and also on Instagram, so you can find at least like the minute-long shorts there. But this is going to be a full episode. We're going to get into a number of different topics. Obviously, the portal closed on April 22nd, and there were some killer late additions into that, which obviously is going to impact what we're going to see in the WCC. There were already some more additions to some of the squads, and we're starting to see a little bit of a trend with WCC teams. We'll get into that. We'll get into the newcomer Seattle U a little bit, as well as they have started to make some noise in the portal as well. And then we'll also get into a non-WCC topic a little bit, being Sac State and the moves that have happened with that program over the last few weeks and what that could mean down the road when it comes to realignment and all of that good stuff. All right, so let's start off with the portal closing and, of course, some late additions to the portal, late subtractions to some WCC teams. A big one was Lamar Washington leaving Pacific. That one was kind of in the 11th hour. So that one will sting Pacific quite a bit. The Tigers had lost quite a bit in the portal, which was to be expected. Also kind of a senior heavy team as well. So not terribly surprising on that. But the Washington move was, I think, a little bit surprising given how late in the process it came. But that is one subtraction. But the biggest subtraction that we saw on the eve of the portal being closed was Jordan Ross hitting the portal from Saint Mary's. And this one also came as a pretty, I think, big surprise because many thought that the only way that he would go is if he was going to be getting a pretty substantial NIL deal from elsewhere. And we already have a landing spot for him. He is going to be going to Georgia. So I'd imagine that the SEC package for NIL is going to be, well, definitely more lucrative than one at St. Mary's was going to be. So if that was the make or break, it makes a lot of sense. It just is a killer to think about what that team is going to look like without a Jordan Ross, because unlike a year ago when St. Mary's lost Aiden Mahaney, they lost Joshua Jefferson, at least there was a little bit of kind of like the plan of who was going to be stepping into those roles. Augustus Marshallonis was going to be back, and then Jordan Ross was going to be stepping into one of those roles. You had Mikey Lewis also coming in as well. So there was at least a little bit of like the next man up, and there was, at least I was pretty confident in the group that was going to be coming in to replace the likes of Aiden Mahaney, really specifically because we're talking about Ross, that this was, it wasn't going to hurt as much. And clearly we did see that while Ross's numbers don't jump off the page, he was their best player in the NCAA tournament. He, time and time again, was one of their best players against some of their better opponents. And that's something that now they're going to be missing. That is something that St. Mary's is going to miss. They're missing a point guard in general right now. Because now you think about Augustus Marshallonis is done. You lose Jordan Ross. And now you look at a situation with the Gales that there isn't the clear cut who the point guard is. Now, there are a number of guys who are going to vie for minutes, and a lot of them are actually, and my thought was going to be at the two, because you have Mikey Lewis coming back, you have Liam Campbell, you have Rory Hawk, you have Josh Dent, you have Cade Bennett, you have a lot of guys who are going to be fighting for minutes in that 1 and 2 role. But unlike years past, I don't think we see the clear cut who's the point guard. And this is very unusual for St. Mary's. We are so used to seeing this squad have multiple guards to go to, whether it be looking back at the Delvedova and Mickey McConnell, which then led to Stephen Holt, which then led to Joe Rahan, which then led to Emmett Nahr, who led to Jordan Ford, who led to Mahaney, who led to Marshallonis. Like, there has just been a constant run of clear-cut point guards for this team, and this is the first year, maybe since, I don't know if we're going all the way back to 2014, where the point guard is not settled and going into the offseason. And this is a big adjustment for the St. Mary squad. This is not something that we're used to seeing from this team. So thinking about what they're going to look like, what this team is going to do, there's definitely going to be some, not soul searching, but there's going to be, I think, some shifts when it comes to St. Mary's and that point guard spot. We're not used to seeing them without one. This is going to be the first time. We really aren't sure who's going to be filling into that role, because I don't think the likes of Josh Dent or Cade Bennett are ready for that responsibility to be the lead guard. I don't know if that's Mikey Lewis then steps into that and plays a little bit more maybe Jordan Ford-like point guard position, where it was definitely more scoring one as opposed to a distribution one. So we'll see what this is going to look like. Obviously, the portal is still active. I'd expect them to go out and try to find a veteran point guard to fill in the gaps there now that there is one. And this is something they're going to need. St. Mary's has already gone out and added a couple more pieces, but it has not been addressing the guard position. And so this is something that, as time will go on, the next couple months, we will see how St. Mary starts to move in that direction. And there, obviously, a number of teams have started to think about and already made moves of how they're going to combat the two behemoths, Gonzaga and St. Mary's, in this conference. Because that's the thing. It's like everyone in this conference is gunning for those two squads, and that's always the goal. It's get to the NCAA tournament, and almost that seems easier than trying to actually finish ahead of either Gonzaga or St. Mary's. But with the changes in Moraga, with the changes in Spokane, there might be at least a little bit of a window, because Gonzaga has been kind of quiet in the portal to this point. Graham Ike does come back. Braden Huff does come back. And their return, when you think about how tough and big St. Mary's was last year and will be again this coming season, you can see a trend in what the other WCC teams have been starting to do. USF, Santa Clara, Washington State, Oregon State, even Seattle. They are going out and getting big, strong, physical players. Because guess what? If you're going to leapfrog either St. Mary's or Gonzaga, you have to be big and strong on your front line, because that is how those teams just wear you out. We now have seen that Gonzaga utilized Ike and Huff at the same time the last few games of the season last year, and it worked really well. And the fact that both of them are coming back, they'll get another season and off season to really kind of refine that ability to play with each other, what that looks like, and then of course what the pieces around them are going to be as well. And we know Gonzaga had some early work done last season in the portal that was going to prep for this season. Braden Huffs, Worley coming over from Virginia, so there was already some pieces that were going to be making some noise going into this year, despite their quiet off season to this point. But when you look at, talked about what USF has already done, and they went out and added a little bit more. Santa Clara, they went out, they've added 3 to this point. All 3 are coming from power conferences. Chris Taggio from Iowa, Alexander Gavaliugov from Villanova, and Gehrig Normand from Michigan State. You are bringing in power conference level talent into the WCC. And Santa Clara, who lost a couple players to power conferences, Tyree Bryant and Christoph Tilley, have quickly kind of flipped that around. And when you look at those players, the one thing that I think leads them to be a little bit maybe more I think fitting to what the WCC is and how you're going to leapfrog those the top two teams, is you have to be big and physical. And that is really what we have seen. Tajo and Norman are big physical players. Norman, even if he's at the guard spot, like he's a bigger guard. So that you have a couple of players who are going to be physical presences for Santa Clara. USF already has done that as well, bringing in David Fuchs. Like that is a big physical player that they have added. They have continued to look at not only what's going to work in WCC play, but what could also work in the tournament. USF has done a really good job also being versatile in a lot of those pieces as well. So, but a portal trend, big and physical. Seattle U, they also have been working hard at trying to fill those spots and being big and physical. They've at a couple of the additions, Brock Felder and Austin Maurer, a couple of bigger guys coming over from Southern Utah and Grand Canyon, respectively. For a Seattle team that overall didn't have that great of a season, they were 14-18 overall, 8-8 in a WAC, but they had some impressive wins. They beat that tournament team, UC San Diego, in the non-conference. They went on the road and beat Washington. They reached the semifinals of the WAC tournament before losing to Utah Valley. This is a Seattle U team that is putting some pieces together. They've added Jun Sukyo, who came over from Gonzaga, another key piece. Miles Amos, a transfer from City College, and Seattle U has had a fair amount of success with players coming from City College of San Francisco into that program. So you think about what Seattle U has already started to do, what Santa Clara has done, what USF has done. What Washington State has done is they've also added a few big guys. What Oregon State has done and adding a few more big guys. Everyone is adding legit size onto their teams to combat what St. Mary's is, what Gonzaga is, because we know what the two strengths of them are. And we saw, obviously, Gonzaga lose a couple of those games in conference play, losing to Santa Clara, losing to Oregon State. Obviously lost both regular season games to St. Mary's. St. Mary's, their one conference loss was USF. So we're starting to see that these teams are knocking on the door. And this is kind of how you have to do it. You have to be big, you have to be physical, and St. Mary's for the longest time was building a roster that was going to be able to beat Gonzaga. Now that it's happening more often, we're starting to see that the similarities, at least in roster structure, maybe not skill set, but roster structure is so similar that the rest of the conference is now starting to replicate that as well. And this being the last year of the WCC as we know it, with both Oregon State, Washington State heading out, with Gonzaga heading out, the big question mark of what is going to happen with St. Mary's, if anything is going to happen with St. Mary's. Seattle U coming in, it leaves a lot of questions to be answered about what we're going to see over the next few months and how all of this is going to shake out. Now, one of the things that popped up, maybe the bigger news, was one of the biggest portal exits in the non-conference was when Cedric Coward said he was going to leave Washington State. And that was a big move, I think, because a lot of people thought this was a David Riley ride or die player in Cedric Coward, but this was someone who was garnering big time interest from the best of schools. And we saw exactly how good in his commitment just this past week when he committed to Duke. And we know that he's one of the most efficient players he was one of the most efficient players in college basketball, from 2, from 3, from the free throw line, maybe a little bit of an undersized big man. Like he was probably playing 4 way more than he should have been. But this is someone who clearly has high level value. Talked about him as being a potential NBA draft pick, and that window has closed. So he will be staying in college basketball. He will be playing for Duke. So that is going to be a fascinating look at what he's going to be able to do on that level, at that next level, for a Duke team that obviously is going to look a lot different next year, but is still going to be knocking on the door. John Shire has done a great job, obviously, the first few years taking over for Coach K and what they're going to be able to do. They reached the Final Four. So this is a great opportunity for Coward over at Duke, and it does say something about the system that David Riley runs. You think about some of the additions that they have already made in the non-conference, and that is where you start to have to look at, like, hey, like this team, this Washington State team, if you're looking on the camera and I'm looking down, it's because I'm pulling up my phone to actually find some of the names. The additions of a Jerome Morton or Emmanuel Ugbo from coming over from Boise State, Simon Hillenbrand, Emeli Yahalo, who just was announced. Yalaho, I should say. Get my pronunciations correct here, and I may still not have gotten it correct. But you have four guys who, like, we know the type of offense they're going to run. They're going to be up tempo. They're going to be fast. They're going to be efficient. The big thing with Washington State is whether or not they can overcome the turnovers that they really were plagued by last year. Injuries aside, can they stay healthy? Can they limit the turnovers? And for new players coming into the system, how quickly can they adjust? How quickly can they learn the pace of what this team is going to do? This Washington State team was really just felt like it ran out of gas last year with the core that they had. They were undermanned, and the pace at which they play just, I think, made it difficult to get deeper and deeper into the season without the depth that they require. Now, with the pieces that they've added, obviously still a long way to go because Washington State lost a ton. You lose Calmise, you lose Coward, you lose Price, you lose Eric Strupp, you lose Watts, both Watts. Like, this is a team that really is starting from scratch. So how quickly they can fill the pieces back in and find efficient pieces that are going to work in David Riley's system is going to be key. And then also there's how quickly can they hit the ground running. And the one thing at the very least, like, it is a system that I think a lot of players are excited to play in because of how up-tempo it is and just the number of opportunities guys will get. And we will see how their schedule starts to break down, because that could also be a telling sign of how much growing this team may need to have. Because if you look at their schedule and it looks like it's slow playing a little bit at the beginning, you can maybe see it's like, okay, this is a team that still needs some work. This is a team that is going to take some time. But if we start to see some of those big matchups right out the gate, then you can see, like, okay, this is a team that David Riley probably has a lot of confidence in right away. And this is a group that we could see be knocking on the door of an NCAA tournament berth, much like we thought we were seeing in the non-conference last year. Like, they were knocking on the door, if not for the injuries, if not for a couple of key losses, and then it kind of got away from them in conference play. But Washington State is doing a lot of really good things right now. They're putting those pieces together, and yes, like, this started with me talking about Cedric Coward and his commitment to Duke. But again, like, it goes back to this trend that WCC teams are trying to get bigger, they're trying to get stronger. A lot of that trying to compete with Gonzaga and Saint Mary's, but because you have to get probably at least one of them to get into the NCAA tournament. And I know that USF a few years ago was the exception to that rule, but it seems far easier to get in if you handle your business in the non-conference and are able to knock off at least Gonzaga or St. Mary's once. Okay, so also wanted to talk about Portland for a little bit, and not necessarily Portland specifically, but we have a couple of familiar Portland faces that are now back in new WCC places. And the two, Vukasin Masic is going to be heading to USF. That's a big get for USF as they're looking to kind of fill in those guard spots. Who's going to be alongside Ryan Beasley, and that's Mosage in that system. I think is going to get a lot of opportunity for more open looks and really kind of like be able to be more efficient with what we've seen him do even at Portland. The double-digit score up at Portland in the last couple seasons, going down to USF, I think it's going to open up his game a little bit more, and he's going to get obviously opportunity to, I think, do more with the Dons this past year, just adding to the list of faces that USF has already continued to add and held on to. Like, you talked about Tyrone Riley was in the portal and then not in the portal as he was convinced to stay. You think about like Mookie Cook, and then also you have Legend Smiley being brought in. You have a lot of key pieces that USF has also been able to do. And the other one that Portland faced coming back is Wanzi Gorosito is going to be back in the WCC as he spent 1 year at Ball State and will be transferring back into the WCC and heading to San Diego to play for Steve Lavin. San Diego just opened up its new basketball training facility, which is obviously an exciting thing for USD and for the program there. They also announced finally the start of officially their NIL program, which again, like these are steps you have to take in today's college basketball, really college landscape in general. And yes, San Diego is behind on this. Like they're definitely a few steps behind a lot of like all the programs in the WCC on that front. But that is something that maybe a little bit better than late than never, but they have some catching up to do. We know that San Diego had a rough year last year. We know that they've had basically full roster turnovers the last couple of years. And San Diego getting at least a familiar face from the WCC, I think is somewhat helpful because then the scouting reports for Gorosito won't be nearly as an uplift as it would be maybe for someone else who's coming in unfamiliar with the coaching styles and systems that are ran in the conference. All right, so now I'm going to switch gears and touch on a topic that is not WCC related, at least not yet, not necessarily, maybe not ever, but Sac State. Over the last year or so, there's been a lot of news about Sac State and what they have been trying to do on the football front, trying to raise funds, raise enough money to redo their facility, whatever else. They want to be FBS. They want to not be left behind in the wake of everything that's happening, which obviously every school is trying to do. They do not want to be left behind if and when the power conference schools say we're packing up and leaving, which is why we've seen a lot of noise about the money being raised, the money that is there, maybe not there. That's Sacramento State is trying to raise for upping the football status and becoming an FBS program. Now the one thing that has had an obvious trickle down effect is you have to have basketball coming with it, and we have seen some moves of late over the last few months that at least make you think that they're making enough noise to you where you have to pay attention. They have hired Mike Bibby, Sacramento Kings great point guard, to be the head coach. They brought in Shakira O'Neal as a transfer, Shaq's son, to coming over from Florida A&M. Shaq himself became the GM of Sacramento State men's basketball just the other day. And then shortly after that, it was Mikey Williams, at one point a very highly touted high school prospect who played last year at UCF, has committed to play at Sac State as well. So you see 4 basketball related moves that at the very least are driving enough attention that can't ignore what Sac State is doing. Now, is it sustainable and is it real? I think is the bigger question. because the presence of Shaq on the surface is maybe the biggest thing here. He being a GM, as we have seen many former players, execs, whatnot, get involved in various D1 programs as GMs or something along those lines, that usually the money follows. And that is obviously a good thing for Sac State in the short term, that there could be more money flowing, maybe for the NIL program, for facilities, for travel, what have you. There's going to be a little bit more oomph behind that program for at least the next year or so. But what happens when Shakir is gone? What happens once he is no longer either at Sac State, whether that be transfer, out of eligibility, what have you? Is Shaq still going to be around? I don't honestly know if he will. And regardless of what, like, press releases, whatever else say, it's like, we'll see. We'll see what happens once that situation occurs. We need to see if Mike Bibby can recruit. We need to see if Mike Bibby can coach. They're still in the Big Sky, and that's a big hill to climb when you're looking at going from Big Sky to the Pac-12. That's 3 leagues down from my competition-wise from where the Pac-12, that future Pac-12 conference would be. That's still behind the Big West, the WCC, and the Mountain West of what that league is going to become. And I don't see Sac State even being close to that yet. And yes, football is the driver of all of it or whatever else, but I just don't see the Pac-12 as a realistic option. The Mountain West seemed maybe more realistic, especially the new Mountain West, but they just added UC Davis, and they share essentially the same marketplace. So having 2 who are trying to get out of FCS and move to FBS at the same time seems dicey to me if you're going to rely a lot on that. I just don't see it from on a Mountain West front, and that's been confirmed by a couple of contacts I've reached out to who are more knowledgeable about it than I am. That it's like Mountain West doesn't seem like it would be an option either. So what does that leave you? Football maybe does an independent thing and tries to go that direction, and the basketball and all the other sports, which also need to pick up the pace, have to have another home. But where? Is it the Big West? I mean, the Big West makes a lot of sense. They have a lot of the other state schools. Is it the WCC? Regionally makes a lot of sense. You have Pacific, you have the 3 Bay Area schools in the new landscape of whatever the WCC is going to be. Because remember, -3 coming next season once Gonzaga, Washington State, Oregon State are gone. So I am not a believer in what we're seeing with Sac State right now, because to me it's a lot of noise. I need to see something more concrete on court and financially, because right now I just don't see how Sac State's going to make this work in the long term. In the short term, it's going to drive a lot of headlines. There's going to be a lot of movement, whatever else, but you're still stuck in the Big Sky. And even if you have the NIL money to get better players, you're still in that conference. You better start then, 1, making the tournament, and then 2, do damage in the tournament. That might be the way that on a basketball front, they become a more attractive product for the Big West, for the WCC or the Mountain West, or even the Pac-12, which I know that is their ultimate goal. All right, well, that'll do it for this episode of the unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. Again, a lot of these short clips or whatever else are going to be more breaking news, so follow along on YouTube and on Instagram for that content. Follow along on social media in general at unofficial WCC pod. So these episodes will be a little bit more broken up, a little bit spaced out throughout the course of the summer, but we will continue to put out content and be trying to cover as much as we possibly can, as we are going to see a ton of changes over the course of the next few months before we get back into full season mode in late September and into October. All right. Once again, thanks for watching, everybody, and I will catch you later.